Mike, will you give us a baseline of, starting sort of October 2024 till now, what's happened with Latino voters?
Yeah, and it's important that this really began to become visible when, Rick, when you and I were working together on the Lincoln Project, and we talk about this sort of late night, is we were pulling this. Remember, this is 2020. This is when Biden wins. And he wins by a margin smaller than most of the public polling. And our polling was saying, we're winning some of these Republicans that we're targeting with the Lincoln Project, but the Democrats are leaking Latinos a little bit. It's putting states like Arizona more in play than they should be. And lo and behold, Trump actually picks up a larger share of the Latino vote in 2020. Nobody noticed it except for us because, fortunately, Biden won, and that we thought was all in the rearview mirror. But the trend line continues. So, Andrew, to your point, in 2024, start ringing the alarm bell and saying, guys, like this has been happening for a while and nobody's paying attention. It's not like Latinos voted in one election cycle. They've been moving in 3 of the last 4 elections.
Right.
And if Trump does win this thing, he's going to win it with a record share of Latino voters. And unfortunately, that's what happened.
Sure.
The reason why, guys, is because it is really about the economy. I mean, to your point, Rick, you and I have had this conversation ad nauseum.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that immigration doesn't matter. It clearly does, but it doesn't matter by a 2.5 to 1 margin. Most polling today is showing immigration concerns are 2.5 times less important than the economy. Like things are getting that bad. The desperation is created this large swing voting group in America that's pretty unique between black and white voters. These Latinos that are moving by 25, 35 points in these election cycles year to year, and the country's never really seen anything like that before.
I mean, a part of it, as you've always said, that if we were in a period right now of great economic growth, I think the Democrats would have a hard time getting those Hispanic voters back, getting those Latino voters back. But the failure on the economy, that central promise of why people come here, you're going to build a better life, you're going to build a more prosperous life than wherever you were before. And with Trump, it doesn't feel that way for people now. The immigration stuff's like icing on the economic cake for a lot of these people, in my view.
Look, if Trump had just gone golfing at Mar-a-Lago for 4 years and just faded into the background, he'd be sitting at probably 55% approval ratings right now. The fact is, the numbers with Latinos started to crash literally on Liberation Day. It started 3.5 months before the ICE raids in Los Angeles. It starts cratering with Latino voters because it's the economy. And that's what I think people really need to figure out is, after the midterms, and we'll talk about the midterms in a little bit, what's the likeliest scenario. But, the Republicans genuinely had a generational opportunity to create this realignment that some of them were talking about. Now, realignment's a very strong term.
I want to talk about that for sure.
But they did have an opportunity to recast themselves for a new generation of Latinos, and they have completely squandered that opportunity in a way I've never seen a self-owned quite like that.
Right, an own goal. Andrew, go ahead. You had a question.
Well, I mean, my question is really, we'll get to the implications, but the realignment specifically, there's still talked about this to this day. Was it real? How significant was it? And, how do Democrats come back from it? It sounds to me like economic messaging is obviously the best route.
So, Andrew, that's a great question. So, look, this began sort of with the Democrats when they used to believe in this concept, this theory called demographics is destiny.
Right.
This really became part of the Obama era thinking, where if all the Democrats would have to do is wait.
Yeah.
Mother Nature and demographics would do its thing. Latinos were born out of the womb 80% Democratic voters. And I was saying, wait, that's not true. Like that's not a real good understanding of the way this ethnic group is voting. And then Republicans make their own mistake based off of the same assumptions, which is they're seeing this rightward shift, and they're sticking the data into their own preconceived conclusions,
right.
Which is always the danger in this business. Is you're not looking at it clean. And so a book came out called Party of the People that suggested there was a racial realignment happening, that now Latinos were born naturally Republicans. It was finally happening. And I was saying, look, there's zero data. There's zero polling data saying Latinos are becoming more Republican, but there's a lot of evidence saying that they're becoming less Democratic. And that's the important distinction. So no, the racial realignment theory, in my opinion, has never been true. It's not a realignment, it's a de-alignment. They're moving away from both parties, and they're truly up for grabs. And one of, I think, the most ironic things at the moment, fellas, is Latinos are rejecting whichever party is doing a bad job in power. And in this country, we're like, why are these voters behaving so peculiarly? But they're voting the way, they're the only voting group that's voting the way you're supposed to vote.
Right. They're voting based on the actual incentives in their lives.
Yes. That's the way the system's designed. And it's like, we're so used to this dysfunction of it. Doesn't matter how bad things get, I'll double down in my tribe.
Right.
Seeing a group actually voting and moving and responding the way they're supposed to and going like, what the hell is wrong with those people? And that's not what's wrong at all.
Why is that? Why is the behavior different for Latinos and just say like white voters? Why is their behavior so much more stubborn?
That's a great question. The answer is Latinos are the least racially polarized voter in America, and they're the least partisan voters in America. They have the fastest tendency to be disaffiliated or move independent and not have a party affiliation. So you see those. And by the way, almost 40% of Latino voters, get this, almost 40% of Latino voters are 30 years of age or younger. So they're of this age where they don't buy the partisan nonsense anyway. Like it's never been part of their reality, which is another reason you can't have a realignment, because they don't have enough of vote history to realign. They're emerging as something totally different. And so if you take Latino working class voters and you compare them to white or black working class voters, both white and black working class voters, the delta, the change in their voting behavior cycle is less than 3%. It will probably be bigger this year because things are collapsing, by the way.
Yeah.
But historically, it's 2 to 3%. Latinos are like 17% right now, guys.
Wow.
We're seeing 25-point swings in special districts elections in Texas. We're seeing 50-point swings in the New Jersey's Passaic County.
Yep.
And by the way, you're seeing it in New York City with the Zoran Mamdani race. You saw it with Mikey Sherrill in Passaic County, New Jersey. You saw it in Manassas County, Virginia with Spanberger. You saw it in
Miami-Dade with the mayor's race.
Miami. So it's like all of the diasporas, all these differences and not monolithic. Right now, guys, Latinos are monolithically anti-Trump and anti-Republican. And I've never seen that before because it's never happened before.
Right. There was always a differentiation between Mexican descent, Cuban descent, all the different, subtext and subgroups had a lot. I mean, as a Cuban friend of mine once said, there's nobody Cubans hate more than other Hispanics.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's right.
But I don't think that applies right now. I think that has slipped out of the.
There's a brotherhood now. There's a brotherhood where you see Cuban. I mean, when was last time, Rick, you saw Cuban Republicans criticizing Republican administration on immigration?
Go to Dade County right now, because every single one of them is like, I love Trump, but yeah, I wish Trump wouldn't do this. And Salazar in 27 down in Florida is absolutely in a panic right now because classic conservative Republican Cuban, maybe not as hardcore conservative as other Republicans, but right for the district. But once they said, "Oh, we're getting rid of TPS and we're sending 300,000 Venezuelans and 150,000 Cubans home by getting rid of TPS," and it's not that those people are her voters, but their families are,
right?
Yeah.
Their friends are, their employers are, and most of them, all of them, under the TPS, are here legally.
Yeah.
It really breaks that covenant. And I think that, and again, that gets down to another economic thing. The theory of Stephen Miller is those lazy people who steal all your benefits are also taking your job. Okay, how's that work? I've never understood how that works.
Well, let me give you another piece of hypocrisy. Why are they talking about a racial realignment and then deporting their own voters if they really believe it?
Right.
Like, if you're really winning the Hispanic vote, why are you kicking them out?
Yeah. And while that's not driving the massive changes, as you point out, that worry is ticking up, and you can see why it's ticking up. Stephen Miller, like military cosplay and actual military usage of ICE, it's everywhere, and that's a community now that There, folks who are here as U.S. citizens, or who were here legally, or who were naturalized, are now they're as scared. I think my theory of the case, at least, they're as scared as people who are not here legally because they're brown and they're
subject to
Spanish.
racial profiling. Yeah,
and the racial profiling at ICE is through the roof.
Rick, I've got friends who've been here 3 generations that are carrying their passports now.
I bet.
Yeah, there's no question it's a glue. And like I said, whenever I say this, people go, "Oh, that's just kind of Madrid being Madrid." I'm not saying it's not important. That data right there, I think, is exactly right. Pew Research is the gold standard.
Solid.
So it is no question it is having certainly a motivating effect, but it's also creating this multi-generational, multi-diaspora, like we were just saying. Cubans are now voting like Dominicans, like Mexicans, like Puerto Ricans. Yep. Everybody's voting the same way because we know they're talking about us. Like, they're talking about you, whether you migrated or your grandparents migrated. It's like they don't want us here. They don't want you here. And it is absolutely a motivating factor.